Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows a need to implement a comprehensive endpoint detection and response EDR strategy using the VMware Carbon Black portfolio. Given the organization's diverse user base and critical applications, what is the most effective approach to ensure robust threat detection while minimizing operational disruption and analyst fatigue? Option A. Configure VMware Carbon Black EDR to aggressively block all suspicious activities, even at the risk of impacting legitimate user workflows, to prioritize absolute threat prevention above all else. Option B. Conduct a thorough threat assessment and risk analysis specific to the organization's environment, followed by a phased deployment of VMware Carbon Black EDR with tailored policies, exclusions, and alert tuning based on initial pilot group feedback and ongoing monitoring. Option C. Implement VMware Carbon Black EDR with a minimal set of detection rules to reduce the volume of alerts, focusing only on the most critical and well-known threat signatures. Option D. Deploy VMware Carbon Black EDR with default vendor-recommended settings across all endpoints immediately to ensure maximum coverage and rely on the security team to filter alerts as they arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough threat assessment and risk analysis specific to the organization's environment, followed by a phased deployment of VMware Carbon Black EDR with tailored policies, exclusions, and alert tuning based on initial pilot group feedback and ongoing monitoring. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a common challenge in cybersecurity implementations, balancing robust security controls with operational efficiency and user experience. In the context of VMware Carbon Black portfolio skills 5v0-91, 20, this often involves deploying endpoint detection and response EDR solutions that can generate significant telemetry. The professional challenge lies in configuring these tools to provide maximum visibility and threat detection without overwhelming security analysts with false positives or impacting system performance to an unacceptable degree. This requires a deep understanding of the specific threats the organization faces, the capabilities of the Carbon Black platform, and the operational environment. Careful judgment is required to tune policies, define exclusions, and prioritize alerts effectively. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a systematic, risk-based methodology for EDR deployment and tuning. It prioritizes understanding the threat landscape and the specific needs of the organization before broad deployment. This aligns with the principles of effective cybersecurity risk management, which emphasize proactive threat intelligence and tailored security measures. By involving stakeholders and conducting phased rollouts with continuous monitoring and feedback, it ensures that the Carbon Black solution is both effective and practical. This approach is ethically sound, as it aims to protect the organization's assets and data while minimizing disruption. An incorrect approach that involves deploying EDR with default settings across the entire organization without prior analysis or tuning is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to a deluge of alerts, many of which may be false positives, overwhelming the security team and potentially masking genuine threats. It also risks significant performance degradation on endpoints, impacting user productivity and potentially violating service-level agreements. From a regulatory perspective, while not a direct violation of a specific law in this context, it represents a failure in due diligence and a lack of prudent cybersecurity practice, which could be scrutinized in the event of a security incident. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on minimizing alerts to reduce analyst workload without considering the potential for missed threats, is also professionally unsound. This approach prioritizes convenience over security, creating blind spots in the organization's defenses. It fails to meet the core objective of an EDR solution, which is to detect and respond to threats. This could lead to significant regulatory and compliance failures if a breach occurs due to undetected malicious activity, as the organization would be unable to demonstrate adequate security controls. A third incorrect approach, implementing EDR solely based on vendor recommendations without considering the organization's unique environment and threat profile, is also problematic. While vendor recommendations are a good starting point, they are often generic, failing to tailor the configuration to the specific risks and operational realities of the organization can lead to either overrestriction, impacting legitimate operations, or underprotection, leaving gaps for attackers. This lack of customization demonstrates a failure to apply professional judgment and a reliance on a one-size-fits-all solution, which is rarely effective in complex IT environments. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Threat modeling. Understand the specific threats relevant to the organization's industry and operations. 2. Risk assessment. Identify critical assets and potential vulnerabilities. 3. Solution evaluation. Assess the capabilities of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio to address identified risks. 4. Phased deployment and tuning. Implement the solution incrementally, starting with a pilot group, and continuously monitor performance and alert fidelity. 5. Stakeholder collaboration. Engage with IT operations, end users, and security analysts to gather feedback and ensure alignment. 6. Continuous improvement. Regularly review and update configurations based on evolving threats, system changes, and performance metrics. Question 2. System analysis indicates that a financial services organization is planning to deploy the VMware Carbon Black portfolio to enhance its endpoint security and threat detection capabilities. The organization has a complex IT environment with numerous legacy systems and a high volume of sensitive customer data. Given these factors, which implementation approach would best balance security efficacy, operational continuity, and risk mitigation? Option A. Implementing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio without providing specific training to the Security Operations Center (SOC) team, assuming they can learn on the job. Option B. A phased rollout beginning with a small representative group of endpoints and gradually expanding to the entire organization after successful validation and performance tuning. Option C. An immediate, organization-wide deployment of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio to ensure all endpoints are protected simultaneously. Option D. A deployment focused exclusively on critical servers, neglecting other endpoint types to minimize initial complexity. The correct answer is B. A phased rollout, beginning with a small representative group of endpoints and gradually expanding to the entire organization after successful validation and performance tuning. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive threat detection and response with the potential for performance degradation and the complexity of integrating a new security solution into an existing infrastructure. Organizations must ensure that the chosen implementation strategy minimizes disruption to critical business operations while adhering to security best practices and any relevant regulatory compliance mandates. The rapid evolution of cyber threats necessitates a proactive and adaptable security posture, making the initial deployment phase critical. Correct approach analysis. Implementing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio in a phased approach, starting with a pilot group and gradually expanding to the entire organization, represents best professional practice. This method allows for thorough testing and validation in a controlled environment, identifying and mitigating any performance issues or integration conflicts before a full rollout. It also provides an opportunity to train IT and security personnel on the new tools and processes, ensuring effective utilization and response capabilities. This approach aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity, ensuring that security measures are effective and do not introduce undue risk. From a regulatory perspective, this phased implementation supports compliance by demonstrating a systematic and risk-managed approach to security control deployment, which is often a requirement for frameworks like NIST or ISO 27001, implicitly guiding best practices even if not explicitly mandated by a specific jurisdiction for this exam. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the VMware Carbon Black portfolio across the entire organization simultaneously without prior testing or a pilot phase is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach introduces a high risk of widespread system instability, performance degradation, and potential security gaps if unforeseen issues arise. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and risk management, which could lead to non-compliance with security standards and potentially impact business continuity, a critical consideration in many regulatory environments. Implementing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio without adequate training for the IT and security teams is also a professional failing. This leads to underutilization of the solution's capabilities, delayed incident response, and an increased likelihood of misconfigurations, all of which compromise the organization's security posture. Ethically, It fails to equip the team with the necessary tools and knowledge to protect the organization's assets effectively. Focusing solely on endpoint protection without considering network visibility and threat hunting capabilities, or vice versa, represents an incomplete security strategy. This siloed approach leaves critical security gaps, making the organization vulnerable to sophisticated attacks that may bypass individual components. It fails to provide a holistic view of the threat landscape, hindering effective threat detection and response, and potentially violating the spirit of comprehensive security mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased implementation strategy. This involves understanding the organization's critical assets and workflows, conducting thorough threat modeling, and planning the deployment in stages. Key steps include defining clear success criteria for each phase, establishing robust monitoring and feedback mechanisms, and ensuring comprehensive training and documentation. This methodical approach minimizes risk, maximizes the effectiveness of the security solution, and ensures alignment with organizational objectives and any applicable regulatory requirements. Question 3. Strategic planning requires a deliberate approach to integrating new security technologies. When implementing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio, what is the most effective strategy to ensure both robust security and minimal operational disruption, while adhering to U.S. regulatory compliance? Option A. Deploy the VMware Carbon Black portfolio across all endpoints and servers simultaneously to achieve immediate and uniform security coverage. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program with a representative user group, gather feedback, refine the deployment strategy, and then proceed with a phased rollout across the organization. Option C. Prioritize the technical installation of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio on all systems, deferring user training and workflow impact assessments until after the deployment is complete. Option D. Implement the VMware Carbon Black portfolio only on systems that are identified as high risk, leaving other systems with their existing security measures. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program with a representative user group, gather feedback, refine the deployment strategy, and then proceed with a phased rollout across the organization. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Implementing a new security solution like VMware Carbon Black portfolio within an organization presents a significant challenge. The primary difficulty lies in balancing robust security posture with operational continuity and user experience. Organizations must navigate complex technical integrations, potential disruption to existing workflows, and the need for comprehensive user training. Furthermore, ensuring compliance with relevant data protection regulations, which are paramount in the U.S. context, adds another layer of complexity. This requires careful consideration of data handling, access controls, and incident response capabilities, all of which are directly impacted by the chosen implementation strategy. Correct approach analysis. A phased rollout, starting with a pilot group and gradually expanding, represents best professional practice. This approach allows for thorough testing in a controlled environment, identification and remediation of unforeseen issues, and refinement of deployment procedures. It minimizes the risk of widespread disruption and ensures that the security controls are effective before full-scale deployment. From a U.S. regulatory perspective, this methodical approach supports compliance with frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework and specific industry regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card industry. By allowing for validation of security controls and data protection measures before they impact the entire organization, it demonstrates due diligence in security implementation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the solution across the entire organization simultaneously without prior testing or a pilot phase is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks widespread operational disruption, potential data breaches due to unaddressed integration issues, and non-compliance with data protection laws if sensitive data is compromised. Shows a lack of due diligence and risk management. Implementing the solution without adequate user training or communication is also a failure. This can lead to user resistance, incorrect usage of the security tools, and potentially circumventing security measures, thereby increasing the organization's vulnerability. Ethically, it fails to empower users with the knowledge to operate within the new security paradigm. From a U.S. regulatory standpoint, insufficient training can contribute to security incidents that violate compliance requirements. Focusing solely on technical deployment without considering the impact on existing business processes and workflows is another failure. This can lead to operational inefficiencies and workarounds that may inadvertently create security gaps. It demonstrates a narrow, technically driven perspective that neglects the broader organizational impact and can lead to non-compliance if critical business functions are compromised. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to security solution implementation. This involves thorough planning, stakeholder engagement, phased deployment with rigorous testing, comprehensive training, and continuous monitoring. The decision-making process should prioritize minimizing disruption, maximizing security effectiveness, and ensuring adherence to all applicable U.S. regulatory requirements. This involves understanding the specific data types handled, the regulatory landscape governing that data, and how the chosen solution impacts those requirements. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a critical vulnerability being exploited within the next 30 days, stemming from an unpatched legacy application that is internet-facing. Which of the following is the most appropriate immediate action to mitigate this risk using the VMware Carbon Black portfolio? Option A. Immediately attempt to patch the legacy application without prior testing. Option B. Isolate the affected endpoint S and apply a virtual patch or exploit mitigation policy through Carbon Black. Option C. Document the vulnerability in a report and schedule it for the next standard patching cycle. Option D. Disable the legacy application entirely until a permanent fix can be deployed. The correct answer is B. Isolate the affected endpoint, S, and apply a virtual patch or exploit mitigation policy through Carbon Black. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a critical vulnerability being exploited within the next 30 days, stemming from an unpatched legacy application that is internet-facing. This scenario presents a significant implementation challenge for a security team tasked with deploying and managing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for remediation with the operational constraints of a production environment, such as potential downtime, compatibility issues with the legacy application, and the availability of skilled personnel for patching and testing. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that effectively mitigates the risk without causing undue disruption or introducing new vulnerabilities. The correct approach involves leveraging Carbon Black's endpoint detection and response EDR capabilities to isolate the affected endpoint, S, and apply a virtual patch or exploit mitigation policy. This represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the high likelihood, high impact risk by preventing exploitation of the known vulnerability in real time, thereby buying time for a permanent fix. This aligns with the principle of defense in depth and proactive threat containment, which are fundamental to modern cybersecurity frameworks and are implicitly supported by regulatory expectations for robust security controls. It demonstrates a mature security posture that prioritizes risk reduction and operational continuity. An incorrect approach would be to simply flag the vulnerability in a report and await the next scheduled patching cycle. This fails to acknowledge the urgency indicated by the risk matrix and the immediate threat posed by an exploitable vulnerability. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach demonstrates negligence and a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting organizational assets and data. It exposes the organization to a high probability of a breach, which could result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities, all of which are contrary to the spirit and letter of cybersecurity regulations that mandate timely risk mitigation. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately attempt to patch the legacy application without proper testing. This introduces a high risk of application failure or instability, potentially leading to service outages and business disruption. While seemingly proactive, this approach lacks the necessary due diligence and risk assessment, potentially creating more problems than it solves. It could also violate internal change management policies and potentially lead to unintended consequences that are difficult to remediate, demonstrating poor professional judgment and a disregard for operational stability. A third incorrect approach would be to disable the legacy application entirely without a comprehensive understanding of its business criticality or the availability of alternatives. This could cripple essential business functions, leading to significant operational and financial losses. While a drastic measure, it is not a considered or strategic response to the identified risk and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the business context in which the security controls operate. It prioritizes a single risk over the overall health and functioning of the organization. The professional reasoning process for this situation should involve a rapid assessment of the threat intelligence, the specific vulnerability, and the impact of potential remediation actions. This includes consulting with application owners, understanding the criticality of the legacy system, and evaluating the efficacy of Carbon Black's threat containment features. The decision-making framework should prioritize immediate risk reduction through containment, followed by a planned and tested permanent remediation strategy, all while considering the operational impact and regulatory compliance requirements. Question 5. The control framework reveals a need to implement VMware Carbon Black endpoint standard across a large, heterogeneous enterprise environment. To minimize disruption and ensure effective threat detection, which deployment strategy best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for risk management? Option A. Deployment with default, permissive security policies to avoid initial compatibility issues, with plans to tighten policies later based on observed activity. Option B. A phased rollout, beginning with a pilot group representing diverse user roles and system configurations, followed by incremental deployment to other departments after thorough testing and validation. Option C. A simultaneous Big Bang deployment across all endpoints to achieve rapid security coverage, with post-deployment troubleshooting as needed. Option D. A deployment focused solely on technical installation, with minimal user communication or training, assuming users will adapt independently. The correct answer is B. A phased rollout, beginning with a pilot group representing diverse user roles and system configurations, followed by incremental deployment to other departments after thorough testing and validation. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in cybersecurity implementation, balancing the need for robust security controls with operational efficiency and user experience. In this scenario, the challenge lies in deploying a new endpoint detection and response EDR solution, specifically VMware Carbon Black, across a diverse enterprise environment. The difficulty arises from the potential for misconfigurations, compatibility issues with existing applications, and the impact on end-user productivity during the rollout. Careful judgment is required to ensure the EDR solution effectively detects and responds to threats without introducing unacceptable disruption. The correct approach emphasizes a phased, risk-based deployment strategy. This involves thorough pre-deployment testing in a lab environment, followed by pilot deployments in representative user groups. This allows for the identification and remediation of compatibility issues and performance impacts before a full-scale rollout. It also enables the collection of feedback from pilot users to refine deployment procedures and training materials. This methodology aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that the deployment adheres to the principle of least privilege and minimizes potential security gaps or operational disruptions. From a regulatory perspective, this approach supports compliance by demonstrating due diligence in implementing security controls and managing associated risks. An incorrect approach that involves a Big Bang deployment without adequate testing or pilot phases is professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to widespread system instability, application failures, and significant user complaints, potentially creating security vulnerabilities if critical systems are rendered inoperable or if the EDR solution itself is unstable. This approach demonstrates a failure to adequately assess and manage risks associated with a significant technology change. Another incorrect approach, which is to deploy the EDR solution with default, overly permissive settings to avoid initial compatibility issues, is also professionally unacceptable. While it might reduce immediate disruption, it significantly weakens the security posture. Overly permissive settings can allow malicious activities to evade detection or grant excessive access to the EDR agent, creating a new attack vector. This violates the principle of least privilege and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the security implications of misconfigured controls. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical deployment without engaging with end users or IT support teams, is also professionally flawed. This neglects the human element of technology adoption. Without proper communication, training, and support, users may struggle to adapt to the new system, leading to workarounds that bypass security controls or increased help desk load. This can undermine the effectiveness of the EDR solution and create operational friction. The professional reasoning process for such a scenario should involve a structured risk assessment, a clear change management plan, and a commitment to iterative improvement. This includes defining clear objectives for the EDR deployment, identifying potential risks and their impact, developing mitigation strategies, and establishing metrics for success. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are crucial to adapt the deployment and configuration based on real-world performance and user experience. Question 6. Assessment of the most effective strategy for integrating VMware Carbon Black EDR into an organization with an existing legacy antivirus solution, considering potential operational disruptions and the need for rapid threat detection capabilities. Option A. Prioritize the technical installation of VMware Carbon Black EDR across the network, deferring any testing or stakeholder communication until after the initial deployment is complete. Option B. Implement VMware Carbon Black EDR as a secondary detection layer, running it in parallel with the legacy antivirus without specific integration testing, assuming both will function independently. Option C. Conduct a pilot deployment of VMware Carbon Black EDR on a representative subset of endpoints, testing for compatibility with the legacy antivirus and gathering feedback from IT operations and end users before a full rollout. Option D. Immediately deploy VMware Carbon Black EDR across all endpoints, disabling the legacy antivirus to avoid potential conflicts and ensure immediate EDR coverage. Correct answer is C. Conduct a pilot deployment of VMware Carbon Black EDR on a representative subset of endpoints, testing for compatibility with the legacy antivirus and gathering feedback from IT operations and end users before a full rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a security team is tasked with deploying a new endpoint detection and response (EDR) solution, specifically VMware Carbon Black, within an organization that has existing security tools. The challenge lies in ensuring that the new solution integrates effectively without causing operational disruptions or creating security gaps. The need to balance rapid deployment with thorough testing and stakeholder communication is paramount. Furthermore, the organization's reliance on a legacy antivirus solution introduces a potential conflict that requires careful management to avoid performance degradation or detection conflicts. The pressure to demonstrate value quickly adds another layer of complexity, potentially tempting shortcuts. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased deployment strategy that prioritizes thorough testing in a controlled environment before a full rollout. This includes a pilot program with a representative subset of endpoints to identify and resolve any compatibility issues or performance impacts with the existing legacy antivirus. Close collaboration with the IT operations team and end users during the pilot phase is crucial for gathering feedback and ensuring a smooth transition. This methodical approach aligns with best practices for implementing new security technologies, minimizing risk, and ensuring the EDR solution functions as intended. It also allows for the validation of detection rules and policy configurations in a real-world setting, which is essential for effective threat detection and response. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity implementations, ensuring that new tools are robust and do not introduce unintended vulnerabilities or operational burdens. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the VMware Carbon Black EDR solution directly across all endpoints without a pilot program or testing against the legacy antivirus creates a significant risk of widespread operational disruption and potential security blind spots. This approach ignores the principle of risk mitigation and could lead to system instability, performance issues, and a failure to detect threats effectively due to conflicts between the EDR and the existing antivirus. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential impact on business operations. Implementing VMware Carbon Black EDR solely as a replacement for the legacy antivirus without any integration or coexistence testing is also problematic. While replacement might be the long-term goal, a direct swap without understanding potential conflicts or ensuring full feature parity could leave the organization vulnerable during the transition. This approach fails to account for the complexities of security tool integration and the potential for unforeseen issues. focusing exclusively on the technical deployment of VMware Carbon Black EDR, without engaging key stakeholders like IT operations, help desk, and end-user representatives, is a critical oversight. This lack of communication can lead to resistance, confusion, and a failure to address user concerns, ultimately hindering the successful adoption and effectiveness of the new security solution. It bypasses essential steps in change management and user acceptance, which are vital for any technology rollout. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this implementation challenge should adopt a structured, risk-aware approach. This involves 1. Understanding the existing environment. Thoroughly assess current security tools, infrastructure, and user workflows. 2. Planning for integration. Develop a detailed plan that considers how the new EDR will coexist or replace existing solutions, including testing for conflicts. 3. Phased deployment. Implement a pilot program in a controlled environment to identify and resolve issues before a full rollout. 4. Stakeholder engagement. Maintain open communication with all relevant teams and end users throughout the process. 5. Continuous monitoring and optimization. After deployment, actively monitor performance and adjust configurations as needed. This systematic process ensures that security objectives are met while minimizing operational risks and maximizing the value of the new technology. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that security analysts managing complex portfolios like VMware Carbon Black may encounter situations where they identify a potential misconfiguration that could lead to unauthorized data access. If an analyst discovers such a vulnerability, what is the most ethically and procedurally sound course of action to ensure both data integrity and compliance with organizational policies? Option A. Delay reporting the vulnerability to conduct further personal investigation without informing relevant stakeholders. Option B. Consult a trusted colleague informally to discuss the issue before deciding on the next steps. Option C. Immediately report the discovered vulnerability through established internal incident response channels or to a designated security lead. Option D. Implement an immediate, unapproved fix to rectify the misconfiguration before notifying anyone. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the discovered vulnerability through established internal incident response channels or to a designated security lead. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a security analyst, tasked with implementing and managing the VMware Carbon Black portfolio, discovers a potential misconfiguration that could inadvertently expose sensitive customer data. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of remediation with the established change management processes and the potential impact of an unannounced fix. The analyst must navigate the ethical obligation to protect data against the procedural requirements of their organization and the potential for unintended consequences if changes are made without proper oversight. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discovered vulnerability through the established internal channels, such as the incident response team or a designated security lead. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for data protection and incident management. By following established protocols, the analyst ensures that the issue is addressed with appropriate expertise, documented correctly, and that any remediation efforts are coordinated and approved, minimizing the risk of further compromise or operational disruption. This adheres to principles of accountability and due diligence expected in cybersecurity roles, particularly when dealing with potential data breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing an immediate, unapproved fix, while seemingly proactive, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses critical change control processes, which are often mandated by compliance frameworks, e.g., SOX, GDPR, HIPAA, depending on the jurisdiction and data type, to ensure that changes are tested, documented, and do not introduce new risks. Such an action could lead to system instability, further data exposure, or an inability to trace the cause of future incidents, violating principles of integrity and responsible system management. Delaying reporting the vulnerability to investigate further without informing relevant parties is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction creates a window of opportunity for exploitation, directly contravening the duty to protect sensitive data. It also undermines transparency and collaboration within the security team and could lead to a more severe incident that is harder to contain and remediate, potentially resulting in significant legal and financial repercussions for the organization. Consulting a colleague informally without following official reporting procedures, while well-intentioned, does not absolve the analyst of their responsibility. This approach lacks the formal documentation and oversight required for critical security issues. It risks the information being lost, misinterpreted, or not acted upon with the necessary urgency and authority, failing to meet the standards of professional conduct and potentially violating data protection regulations by not initiating a formal incident response. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cybersecurity roles must prioritize a structured, documented, and collaborative approach to security incidents and vulnerabilities. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identification of the issue. 2. Immediate escalation through established channels. 3. Collaboration with the appropriate teams for assessment and remediation. 4. Adherence to organizational policies and regulatory requirements throughout the process. This ensures accountability, minimizes risk, and upholds ethical obligations to protect data and systems. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates a critical security incident requires immediate investigation using the VMware Carbon Black portfolio, but the primary security analyst with the necessary access credentials is unexpectedly unavailable for an extended period. A senior IT manager, not directly responsible for security operations, but with broad system access, requests temporary elevated privileges to the Carbon Black environment to expedite the investigation. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Grant the senior IT manager temporary, role-based access to the specific Carbon Black data required for the investigation, ensuring all actions are logged and audited, and immediately initiate a process to onboard a secondary authorized analyst. Option B. Allow the senior IT manager to access the Carbon Black portfolio using their existing broad system access, assuming they will act responsibly. Option C. Deny the request outright, stating that only the primary security analyst can access the Carbon Black portfolio and wait for their return. Option D. Provide the senior IT manager with the primary security analyst's credentials to allow immediate access and expedite the investigation. The correct answer is A. Grant the senior IT manager temporary, role-based access to the specific Carbon Black data required for the investigation, ensuring all actions are logged and audited, and immediately initiate a process to onboard a secondary authorized analyst. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the immediate need for a security solution against the potential for unauthorized access and data compromise, which directly impacts client trust and regulatory compliance. The core dilemma lies in balancing expediency with the stringent requirements of data protection and access control mandated by the VMware Carbon Black Portfolio Skills Framework, which implicitly aligns with general cybersecurity best practices and potential regulatory oversight concerning data handling. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established security protocols and the principle of least privilege by ensuring that all access to sensitive security data, including that managed by the VMware Carbon Black portfolio, is logged, audited, and requires explicit authorization. It upholds the integrity of the security posture. This aligns with the ethical imperative to protect client data and the implicit regulatory expectation of robust access controls. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship and minimizes the risk of unauthorized disclosure or manipulation, which could have severe reputational and legal consequences. An incorrect approach that bypasses standard authorization procedures for expediency creates significant regulatory and ethical failures. It violates the principle of least privilege, a cornerstone of cybersecurity, by granting broader access than necessary. This increases the attack surface and the likelihood of accidental or malicious data breaches. From a regulatory standpoint, such actions could be interpreted as a failure to implement adequate security measures, potentially leading to noncompliance with data protection laws and industry standards. Furthermore, it erodes trust with stakeholders, as it suggests a disregard for established security governance. Another incorrect approach that involves sharing credentials or using generic, unmonitored accounts is equally problematic. This directly contravenes auditability requirements, making it impossible to trace actions back to specific individuals. This lack of accountability is a critical security and ethical lapse. It also creates a significant compliance risk, as many regulatory frameworks require clear audit trails for access to sensitive systems and data. Such practices can lead to severe penalties and a loss of confidence from clients and governing bodies. The professional reasoning process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. When faced with a request that seems to circumvent established procedures, the professional should first seek clarification and explore authorized alternatives. If an immediate need cannot be met through standard channels, escalation to a security manager or designated authority is the appropriate step. This ensures that any deviation from policy is documented, justified, and approved, maintaining accountability and compliance. The decision-making process must always prioritize data security, client confidentiality, and adherence to legal and ethical obligations over short-term convenience. Question 9. To address the challenge of presenting the effectiveness of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio to a client, which approach best upholds professional integrity and regulatory compliance in a security assessment report? Option A. Frame the assessment results to strongly imply that the VMware Carbon Black portfolio is a complete solution for all security threats, downplaying the need for ongoing human oversight or complementary security measures. Option B. Selectively present only the most positive findings and success metrics, omitting any data that might suggest limitations or areas where the VMware Carbon Black portfolio did not fully resolve identified security issues. Option C. Emphasize the most advanced features of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio, highlighting their potential capabilities and theoretical benefits, even if direct, measurable impact on the client's specific environment is not fully demonstrated in the current assessment. Option D. Focus on clearly articulating the specific vulnerabilities the VMware Carbon Black portfolio successfully mitigated, providing concrete examples and data, while also transparently detailing any areas where its effectiveness was limited or required further human intervention. The correct answer is D. Focus on clearly articulating the specific vulnerabilities the VMware Carbon Black portfolio successfully mitigated, providing concrete examples and data, while also transparently detailing any areas where its effectiveness was limited or required further human intervention. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a vendor's desire to showcase their product's capabilities and the client's need for objective, unbiased security assessments. The pressure to highlight positive findings, even if minor or potentially misleading, can compromise the integrity of the security posture evaluation. Careful judgment is required to balance demonstrating value with maintaining ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and factual reporting. By focusing on the actual effectiveness of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio in addressing identified vulnerabilities, rather than exaggerating its impact, the professional upholds the principles of honesty and integrity. This aligns with the ethical guidelines of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio skills framework, which implicitly requires accurate representation of product capabilities and their real-world application in security. Furthermore, it adheres to the spirit of regulatory compliance by ensuring that security assessments are not manipulated to create a false sense of security, which could have downstream legal and operational consequences for the client. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on presenting the most impressive, albeit potentially superficial, findings would fail to provide a true picture of the client's security posture. This could lead to a misallocation of resources, a false sense of security, and ultimately increased risk. Ethically, this is a failure of due diligence and honesty. Another incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting significant vulnerabilities that the Carbon Black portfolio did not fully mitigate would be a direct violation of the principle of full disclosure. This misleads the client about their actual risk landscape and their reliance on the product. Regulatory frameworks often mandate accurate reporting of security risks. A third incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting data to make the Carbon Black portfolio appear more effective than it is, perhaps by omitting context or comparing it to less robust solutions without explicit client consent, is deceptive. This erodes trust and violates the professional's duty to provide objective advice. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the client's objectives for the security assessment, a commitment to factual reporting, and a willingness to communicate both successes and limitations of the technology. Professionals should always ask, does this representation accurately reflect the reality of the security posture and the product's effectiveness? And would this information be valuable and truthful to the client in making informed decisions? Adherence to the ethical guidelines of the VMware Carbon Black portfolio skills, which emphasize integrity and client trust, should be paramount. Question 10. Governance review demonstrates that the incident response team's manual triage and enrichment processes for security alerts are leading to significant delays in threat containment. The team is overwhelmed with alert volume, and critical actions are often postponed due to the time required for human analysis. Considering the need to optimize these processes within the existing VMware Carbon Black portfolio, which of the following actions would best address the governance review's findings while adhering to best practices for efficient and compliant security operations? Option A. Temporarily suspend adherence to established incident response playbooks for critical alerts to expedite containment, focusing solely on immediate threat mitigation. Option B. Introduce a new, standalone threat intelligence platform that requires significant manual integration and data correlation with the existing VMware Carbon Black environment. Option C. Implement automated alert triage and enrichment workflows within the VMware Carbon Black platform, leveraging its threat intelligence feeds and endpoint data correlation capabilities to prioritize and gather initial context for high-fidelity alerts, thereby enabling faster containment. Option D. Increase the number of security analysts on the incident response team to handle the alert volume manually, without altering the existing triage and enrichment procedures. The correct answer is C. Implement automated alert triage and enrichment workflows within the VMware Carbon Black platform, leveraging its threat intelligence feeds and endpoint data correlation capabilities to prioritize and gather initial context for high-fidelity alerts, thereby enabling faster containment. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the imperative of maintaining auditable and compliant processes. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing optimizations that enhance efficiency without compromising the integrity of security incident handling, which is heavily scrutinized by regulatory bodies and internal governance frameworks. The correct approach focuses on leveraging the VMware Carbon Black portfolio's capabilities to automate and streamline repetitive tasks within the incident response lifecycle. This aligns with best professional practice by directly addressing the governance review's findings through actionable improvements. Specifically, automating threat triage, enrichment, and initial containment actions using Carbon Black's platform reduces manual effort, minimizes human error, and ensures a consistent, documented response. This adherence to documented, automated processes is crucial for demonstrating compliance with frameworks that mandate timely and effective incident management, such as those requiring evidence of due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the core issues identified by the governance review or introduce new risks. One incorrect approach might involve simply increasing staffing levels without process improvement. This is professionally unacceptable because it does not address the root cause of inefficiency and can lead to increased operational costs without a proportional increase in effectiveness. It also fails to leverage technological solutions, which are often mandated or encouraged by regulatory guidelines for efficient security operations. Another incorrect approach could be to bypass established incident response playbooks in the name of speed. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it undermines the auditability of the response, potentially leads to inconsistent or incomplete actions, and violates principles of due process in security investigations. Such a deviation would likely contravene regulations requiring documented procedures and evidence of thorough investigation. A third incorrect approach might be to implement a new, unproven technology without proper integration or training. This introduces operational risk and could lead to further inefficiencies or security gaps, failing to meet the governance review's objective of optimization and potentially violating guidelines that require the use of tested and validated security tools. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the governance review's findings and the specific pain points. Then, they should evaluate the capabilities of their existing security portfolio, like VMware Carbon Black, to identify opportunities for automation and process enhancement. A structured approach involving pilot testing, stakeholder buy-in, and clear documentation of changes is essential. This decision-making process should always prioritize solutions that enhance efficiency while maintaining or improving compliance, auditability, and overall security posture. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that the current incident response process for VMware Carbon Black Alerts is experiencing delays in triage and containment. To optimize this process, which of the following actions would best align with a data-driven, risk-aware approach to improvement? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current incident response workflow, identifying specific bottlenecks, measuring key performance indicators, KPI, such as mean time to triage MTTT and mean time to contain MTTC, and then proposing targeted phased improvements based on this data. Option B. Mandate that all security analysts immediately adopt a more aggressive, proactive threat hunting methodology for all incoming alerts, regardless of their severity or source, to ensure no threat is missed. Option C. Overhaul the entire incident response playbook by introducing a completely new set of procedures and tools without prior testing or validation, aiming for a radical transformation of the process. Option D. Implement a new advanced threat intelligence platform and immediately integrate all its alerts into the existing triage workflow to broaden detection capabilities. The correct answer is D. Implement a new advanced threat intelligence platform and immediately integrate all its alerts into the existing triage workflow to broaden detection capabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the imperative to maintain operational stability and adhere to established processes. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing improvements to the incident response workflow without introducing new vulnerabilities or disrupting critical business functions. Careful judgment is required to assess the impact of proposed changes on system performance, data integrity, and compliance requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically analyzes the existing process, identifies specific bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and proposes targeted, data-driven optimizations. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk management inherent in cybersecurity frameworks. By focusing on measurable outcomes and phased implementation, it minimizes disruption and ensures that changes are effective and sustainable. This proactive and analytical method is crucial for maintaining a robust and efficient security posture, which is indirectly supported by regulatory expectations for effective security controls and incident management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing new technologies without a thorough understanding of the existing workflow risks, introducing complexity and potential points of failure. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as increased false positives, slower response times due to integration issues, or even system instability, all of which could have regulatory implications if they compromise the organization's ability to protect sensitive data or respond effectively to breaches. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness in process analysis might overlook critical dependencies or security considerations, leading to a solution that is superficially faster but ultimately less secure or reliable. This failure to conduct due diligence can result in non-compliance with security standards and potentially lead to regulatory penalties. A third incorrect approach that involves broad, unvalidated changes without pilot testing or stakeholder buy-in is professionally unsound. It increases the risk of widespread disruption and can erode trust within the security team and with other departments, hindering future improvement efforts and potentially creating compliance gaps. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of current processes and their objectives. This involves mapping workflows, identifying key performance indicators, and gathering data on existing performance. Next, potential optimizations should be evaluated based on their feasibility, impact, and alignment with organizational goals and regulatory requirements. A phased implementation approach, including pilot testing and continuous monitoring, is essential to validate the effectiveness of changes and mitigate risks. Regular review and adaptation of processes based on performance data and evolving threat landscapes are also critical components of effective cybersecurity management. Question 12. The control framework reveals that following a significant security incident involving a novel malware variant, the incident response team successfully contained the threat. However, the process for identifying, analyzing, and escalating similar threats in the future remains largely unchanged from pre-incident procedures. Which of the following approaches best addresses the need for process optimization in light of this incident? Option A. Focus on creating a comprehensive, detailed report of the incident's technical aspects, without making significant changes to the existing operational procedures, as the current framework was deemed adequate for initial containment. Option B. Implement a policy requiring all security analysts to manually cross-reference threat intelligence feeds with system logs on a daily basis to catch potential threats, regardless of automated alerts. Option C. Conduct a thorough post-incident analysis to identify specific gaps in the existing threat detection and response playbooks, and then update these playbooks with refined procedures and new detection rules, followed by team training on the updated processes. Option D. Immediately deploy additional security tools to broaden the organization's threat intelligence capabilities, assuming that more tools will inherently improve future response times. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough post-incident analysis to identify specific gaps in the existing threat detection and response playbooks, and then update these playbooks with refined procedures and new detection rules, followed by team training on the updated processes. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in cybersecurity operations: the tension between rapid threat response and the need for thorough, documented process optimization. In the context of the VMware Carbon Black Portfolio Skills Exam, 5V0-91. 20. This scenario is professionally challenging because a rushed response, while seemingly effective in the short term, can lead to systemic vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and inefficient resource allocation if not properly integrated into ongoing operational improvements. The pressure to contain an immediate threat can overshadow the strategic imperative to refine the processes that enable that containment. The correct approach, focusing on integrating lessons learned from the incident into a documented process optimization cycle, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk management, which are foundational to robust cybersecurity. By analyzing the incident's root causes, identifying bottlenecks in the response workflow, and updating playbooks or standard operating procedures, SOP, organizations ensure that future incidents are handled more effectively and efficiently. This proactive stance not only enhances security posture, but also demonstrates due diligence and adherence to best practices in operational resilience, which are implicitly expected within the regulatory and compliance landscape governing cybersecurity operations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, ad hoc fixes without subsequent process review creates significant regulatory and ethical failures. Such an approach can lead to inconsistent application of security controls, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance with any applicable regulations that mandate standardized incident response and risk mitigation. Ethically, it represents a failure to learn from experience and a potential disregard for the long-term security of the organization and its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical remediation without considering the procedural aspects, overlooks the human and process elements critical to effective cybersecurity. This can result in a fragile security posture where the underlying procedural weaknesses remain unaddressed, leaving the organization vulnerable to similar or novel threats. A third incorrect approach, involving extensive documentation of the incident without actionable insights for process improvement, is a wasted opportunity. While documentation is crucial, its purpose in an operational context is to drive learning and enhancement. Failing to translate documentation into tangible process changes is a failure of operational effectiveness and a missed opportunity to strengthen the organization's defenses. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a post-incident review that explicitly assesses the effectiveness of the response process itself. This review should identify areas for improvement, prioritize those improvements based on risk and impact, and then integrate them into the organization's standard operating procedures and training. This iterative cycle of response, review, and refinement is essential for maintaining a mature and adaptive cybersecurity program. Question 13. Consider a scenario where a cybersecurity team has identified a new, sophisticated threat vector targeting financial institutions. They have evaluated the VMware Carbon Black portfolio and believe a specific module can effectively mitigate this threat. However, The full integration and validation of this module across the entire enterprise network will take several weeks. The CISO is under pressure to deploy a solution immediately. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible and compliant course of action? Option A. Implement a pilot deployment of the Carbon Black module on a subset of critical systems, focusing on the identified threat vector, while concurrently developing a comprehensive validation plan against organizational security policies and relevant regulatory requirements. Option B. Immediately deploy the Carbon Black module across all enterprise systems without further validation, relying on the vendor's assurance of its effectiveness against known threats. Option C. Deploy the Carbon Black module with default configurations, assuming these are sufficient to address the new threat vector, and address any specific validation or policy alignment issues after the initial deployment. Option D. Delay the deployment of the Carbon Black module until a perfect, all-encompassing threat intelligence feed is available, and the module can be fully integrated and validated across the entire network, even if this takes several months. The correct answer is A. Implement a pilot deployment of the Carbon Black module on a subset of critical systems, focusing on the identified threat vector, while concurrently developing a comprehensive validation plan against organizational security policies and relevant regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid threat response and the need for thorough, documented validation of security controls. The CISO must balance the immediate operational need for a deployed solution with the regulatory and compliance requirements for demonstrating the effectiveness and appropriateness of security measures. The VMware Carbon Black Portfolio Skills exam, particularly in the context of 5V0-91. 20 emphasizes not just technical implementation, but also the strategic and governance aspects of cybersecurity. The correct approach, which involves a phased deployment with ongoing validation against defined security policies and regulatory mandates, represents best professional practice. This aligns with principles of risk management and due diligence. By systematically testing and validating the Carbon Black solution against specific threat intelligence and organizational security policies, the CISO ensures that the deployed controls are effective, proportionate, and compliant with relevant regulations. This methodical approach provides auditable evidence of control effectiveness, crucial for demonstrating compliance during internal or external audits. It also allows for iterative refinement of the solution based on real-world performance and evolving threat landscapes, minimizing the risk of misconfiguration or unintended consequences. An incorrect approach of immediately deploying the solution across the entire organization without prior validation against specific threat intelligence and organizational policies would be professionally unacceptable. This bypasses critical risk assessment and validation steps, potentially leading to the deployment of ineffective or even detrimental security controls. This failure to adequately assess and validate security measures could violate regulatory requirements that mandate the implementation of appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security appropriate to the risk. For instance, if the solution is not properly configured to detect specific threats relevant to the organization's industry or data types, it would fail to meet the appropriate standard. Another incorrect approach, that of delaying deployment indefinitely until a perfect, all-encompassing threat intelligence feed is available, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a failure to manage risk proactively. While comprehensive intelligence is desirable, the regulatory and ethical obligation is to implement reasonable and effective controls based on available information and identified risks. Indefinite delay in the face of known threats can be interpreted as negligence, failing to uphold the duty of care to protect organizational assets and data. This could lead to significant breaches that could have been mitigated, resulting in regulatory penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the technical capabilities of the Carbon Black solution without considering the specific threat landscape and organizational security policies, is also problematic. Security solutions are tools. Their effectiveness is contingent on their proper application to address specific risks. Without this contextualization, the deployment might be technically sound but operationally irrelevant or insufficient to address the most critical threats. This oversight could lead to a false sense of security and a failure to meet regulatory expectations for risk-based security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment, followed by the selection and validation of appropriate security control. This includes clearly defining the threat landscape and organizational security objectives, evaluating potential solutions like the VMware Carbon Black portfolio against these objectives, developing a phased deployment and validation plan that includes testing against specific threat scenarios and organizational policies, and establishing ongoing monitoring and review processes to ensure continued effectiveness and compliance. This iterative and evidence-based approach ensures that security investments are both technically sound and strategically aligned with risk mitigation and regulatory requirements. Question 14. The investigation demonstrates that a sophisticated phishing campaign has successfully compromised several endpoints within the organization, leading to potential data exfiltration. The Carbon Black EDR is actively detecting malicious processes and network connections. Given the potential for sensitive customer data to be involved, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action from a stakeholder perspective, balancing security and compliance? Option A. Immediately isolate all affected endpoints from the network to prevent further lateral movement and data exfiltration, while simultaneously initiating a forensic data collection process on those endpoints for later analysis. Option B. Prioritize the complete and immediate eradication of all detected malicious indicators across the network before any data collection or isolation procedures are initiated. Option C. Begin extensive data collection from all endpoints, including non-affected ones, to build a complete picture of the environment before implementing any isolation or eradication measures. Option D. Halt all containment actions until a comprehensive legal review can be conducted to determine the exact nature of any potentially compromised data and its regulatory implications. The correct answer is A. Immediately isolate all affected endpoints from the network to prevent further lateral movement and data exfiltration, while simultaneously initiating a forensic data collection process on those endpoints for later analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid threat containment and the requirement for thorough, documented evidence preservation, particularly when dealing with sensitive data that may have regulatory implications. The VMware Carbon Black Portfolio Skills exam, focusing on practical application, necessitates understanding how to balance these competing demands within a defined operational and regulatory context. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes immediate threat mitigation, while simultaneously initiating a process for comprehensive data collection and analysis that aligns with potential regulatory requirements for incident response and data breach notification. This proactive stance ensures that critical evidence is not compromised by hasty actions, and that the organization can later demonstrate due diligence in its response, which is crucial for compliance with frameworks like those governing data privacy and cybersecurity incident reporting. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate system isolation without considering data preservation would fail to meet the standards for forensic readiness. This could lead to the loss of crucial evidence needed for root cause analysis, legal proceedings, or regulatory audits. Another incorrect approach that delays containment to gather extensive, non-essential data before acting would unnecessarily expose the organization to further risk and potential damage, violating the principle of timely incident response. A third incorrect approach that bypasses established incident response protocols in favor of ad hoc measures risks creating an inconsistent and unrepeatable process, which is often a red flag during regulatory reviews and can undermine the credibility of the investigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a rapid assessment of the threat's severity and potential impact. This is followed by an evaluation of containment strategies that minimize data loss and evidence compromise. The framework should then incorporate a plan for evidence collection and preservation that is both efficient and compliant with relevant regulations, ensuring that all actions are documented and auditable. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that the introduction of new mission-critical applications often presents unique security challenges. A development team is preparing to launch a new customer-facing application that handles sensitive personal data. They are concerned that overly aggressive endpoint security policies might interfere with the application's performance during its initial rollout phase, potentially impacting user experience and adoption. The security team, responsible for overall organizational security posture, needs to ensure this new application is adequately protected from the outset. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for robust security with the development team's concerns regarding application performance and agility during the initial deployment? Option A. Defer the implementation of comprehensive security monitoring and protection for the new application until after its initial launch and stabilization period, relying solely on the development team's internal testing for security assurance. Option B. Apply the most restrictive, organization-wide endpoint security policies to the new application's environment to ensure maximum protection against all potential threats, regardless of the impact on application performance. Option C. Implement granular, application-aware security policies within the VMware Carbon Black portfolio that are specifically tuned to monitor and protect the new application's processes and network traffic, while establishing a clear communication channel with the development team for rapid feedback and policy adjustments based on observed performance. Option D. Provide the development team with a generic security checklist and allow them to implement their own security controls using basic operating system features, with minimal oversight from the security team. The correct answer is C. Implement granular, application-aware security policies within the VMware Carbon Black portfolio that are specifically tuned to monitor and protect the new application's processes and network traffic, while establishing a clear communication channel with the development team for rapid feedback and policy adjustments based on observed performance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where a security team must balance the need for rapid threat detection and response with the potential for disrupting critical business operations. The introduction of a new, highly sensitive application by a different department creates a conflict. The security team's mandate is to protect the organization's assets, which includes ensuring the integrity and availability of all systems, especially new ones. However, the development team's desire for agility and minimal friction during the application's initial rollout adds pressure. The challenge lies in implementing robust security controls without hindering the application's functionality or the development team's workflow, all while adhering to the organization's security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative, risk-based strategy aligned with the VMware Carbon Black portfolio's capabilities. This means engaging with the development team early to understand the application's specific security requirements and potential attack vectors. Leveraging Carbon Black's endpoint and workload protection features, the security team can implement tailored policies that monitor for anomalous behavior, detect potential threats, and provide visibility into the application's execution environment. This proactive and integrated approach ensures that security is built into the application's lifecycle from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. It adheres to best practices by prioritizing threat prevention and detection through granular policy enforcement, minimizing false positives, and providing actionable intelligence for rapid response. This aligns with the principles of a defense-in-depth strategy and the need for continuous security monitoring, as mandated by general cybersecurity best practices, and implied by the need for robust endpoint protection solutions like those offered by VMware Carbon Black. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing overly broad, restrictive policies without understanding the application's specific needs is a regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach could lead to the blocking of legitimate application functions, causing operational disruptions and potentially violating service-level agreements or business continuity plans. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the application's context and a failure to apply security controls proportionally to the risk. Another incorrect approach is to defer security implementation entirely to the development team without providing adequate guidance or oversight. This is a significant ethical and regulatory lapse. The security team has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the organization's assets. Delegating this responsibility without ensuring the development team possesses the necessary expertise or tools to implement effective security controls is a dereliction of duty. It could lead to vulnerabilities being introduced into the application, exposing the organization to significant risks and potential noncompliance with data protection regulations. Finally, adopting a wait-and-see approach, where security monitoring is only initiated after the application is live and issues arise, is also professionally unacceptable. This reactive stance is inherently risky and fails to meet the proactive threat detection and prevention capabilities expected from modern security solutions like the VMware Carbon Black portfolio. It increases the likelihood of a successful attack and significant damage before any mitigation can occur, representing a failure to uphold the organization's security posture and potentially violating regulatory requirements for timely threat identification. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, collaborative approach. This involves understanding the business context of new applications, identifying potential threats, and then applying security controls that are proportionate to the identified risks. Engaging stakeholders, leveraging the capabilities of security tools like the VMware Carbon Black portfolio for granular monitoring and policy enforcement, and prioritizing proactive threat hunting and incident response are key. When faced with conflicting priorities, professionals should escalate concerns through established channels, clearly articulating the risks associated with inadequate security measures and proposing solutions that balance security with operational needs. The decision-making process should be guided by the organization's security policies, relevant industry best practices, and a commitment to ethical security stewardship. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that the VMware Carbon Black endpoint standard, recently deployed to enhance endpoint security, is generating a high volume of false positive alerts related to legitimate internal applications. This is causing significant disruption to user workflows and increasing the workload for the Security Operations Center (SOC). What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Continue normal operations and instruct the SOC to filter out the false positive alerts manually. Option B. Immediately disable the VMware Carbon Black endpoint standard across all endpoints to stop the disruptive alerts. Option C. Roll back the entire VMware Carbon Black deployment to the previous stable version without further analysis. Option D. Engage VMware Carbon Black support to investigate the root cause of the false positive alerts and collaboratively develop a targeted remediation strategy. The correct answer is D. Engage VMware Carbon Black support to investigate the root cause of the false positive alerts and collaboratively develop a targeted remediation strategy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations where a newly deployed security tool, the VMware Carbon Black endpoint standard, is exhibiting unexpected behavior. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate threat mitigation with the potential for disruption to critical business operations. A hasty rollback without proper investigation could leave the organization vulnerable, while continued operation without understanding the root cause could lead to significant downtime or data loss. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly, coupled with the potential impact on business continuity, necessitates a structured and informed decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to identify the root cause of the false positive alerts. This aligns with best practices for incident response and change management, emphasizing data-driven decision-making. By engaging the Carbon Black support team and leveraging their expertise, the organization can efficiently diagnose the issue. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes understanding the problem before implementing a solution, thereby minimizing the risk of unintended consequences. It also adheres to the principle of least privilege and due diligence in security operations, ensuring that any remediation steps are targeted and effective. Furthermore, it demonstrates a commitment to maintaining operational integrity while addressing security concerns. A key tenet of effective IT governance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Immediately disabling the VMware Carbon Black endpoint standard without further investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action bypasses established incident response protocols and could leave the organization exposed to actual threats, violating the duty of care to protect organizational assets and data. It represents a reactive, rather than proactive, security posture. Rolling back the entire Carbon Black deployment to a previous version without pinpointing the specific configuration or rule causing the false positives is also professionally unsound. This broad action could undo legitimate security protections and introduce new vulnerabilities. It demonstrates a lack of granular problem solving and could be seen as a failure to adequately manage the deployed security solution. Ignoring the false positive alerts and continuing with normal operations hoping the issue resolves itself, is a critical failure. This approach neglects the potential for the false positives to mask real threats or to indicate a deeper systemic issue within the security infrastructure. It violates the principle of vigilance and proactive threat management, potentially leading to severe security breaches and noncompliance with data protection regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with information gathering and analysis. When faced with unexpected behavior from a security tool, the first step is to collect all relevant data, including logs, alert details, and system performance metrics. This is followed by hypothesis generation and testing, where potential causes are identified and investigated. Collaboration with vendor support and internal IT teams is crucial for efficient diagnosis. Remediation should be based on a clear understanding of the root cause and should follow a change management process, including testing and validation. This iterative process ensures that solutions are effective, minimize disruption, and maintain compliance with security policies and regulatory requirements. Question 17. Examination of the data shows a suspicious process activity on a critical server, potentially indicating a compromise. The security team needs to determine if this activity involved the access or exfiltration of sensitive customer data, including personally identifiable information, PI, to comply with data breach notification requirements. Which of the following actions best represents the most appropriate and compliant decision-making process in this situation? Option A. Defer any decision regarding notification until a comprehensive forensic analysis can be completed, which may take several weeks, to ensure absolute certainty. Option B. Conduct a thorough investigation using the VMware Carbon Black platform to analyze process activity, network connections, and file access logs to definitively determine if PII was accessed or exfiltrated before deciding on notification. Option C. Rely on anecdotal reports from users about unusual system behavior to trigger a data breach notification without further technical validation. Option D. Immediately initiate a full data breach notification to all relevant authorities and affected individuals based on the suspicion of compromise. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a full data breach notification to all relevant authorities and affected individuals based on the suspicion of compromise. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity incident response, balancing the immediate need for threat containment with the regulatory obligations for data breach notification. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing the scope and impact of the incident, particularly concerning personally identifiable information, PI, within a compressed time frame. The VMware Carbon Black portfolio skills exam emphasizes understanding how to leverage security tools to gather actionable intelligence for such decisions. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation using the Carbon Black platform to determine if PII was accessed or exfiltrated. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate notification only when PII is compromised, avoiding unnecessary panic and resource expenditure. Best professional practice dictates a data-driven decision, supported by evidence from security tools, to ensure compliance and effective incident management. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume a breach of PII and initiate notification without sufficient evidence. This could lead to premature reporting, potentially violating regulations that require specific thresholds of compromise to be met before notification. Another incorrect approach is to delay investigation indefinitely, hoping the issue resolves itself, which would be a clear violation of regulatory timelines for breach assessment and notification. Finally, making a decision based on anecdotal evidence or speculation rather than concrete data from the security platform is professionally unsound and ethically questionable, as it risks either over-reporting or under-reporting a significant event. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence gathering. This involves 1. Initial triage, understanding the nature of the alert. 2. Investigation, utilizing security tools like Carbon Black to trace the incident's path and identify compromised systems and data. 3. Impact assessment, specifically determining if PII was involved. 4. Decision, based on the evidence, deciding on the appropriate course of action, including notification, if required by applicable regulations. Question 18. Performance analysis shows a critical alert from the VMware Carbon Black endpoint detection and response (EDR) solution indicating suspicious process activity on a single server within a production environment. The alert is flagged with a high severity, but the exact nature of the suspicious activity is not immediately clear from the alert details alone. Given the potential for rapid impact, what is the most appropriate initial course of action? Option A. Ignore the alert and continue normal operations, as there has been a history of false positives from the EDR system in the past. Option B. Escalate the alert directly to a third-party incident response firm for immediate engagement without any internal investigation. Option C. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network to contain any potential threat, and then proceed with a detailed forensic investigation of the server's telemetry data to understand the anomaly. Option D. Disable the VMware Carbon Black agent on all endpoints across the organization to prevent any further potential disruption caused by the alert. The correct answer is C. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network to contain any potential threat, and then proceed with a detailed forensic investigation of the server's telemetry data to understand the anomaly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations where a detected anomaly requires immediate action, but the exact nature and impact are not fully understood. The urgency to contain a potential threat clashes with the need for accurate assessment to avoid unnecessary disruption or misallocation of resources. The professional challenge lies in balancing rapid response with informed decision-making, especially when dealing with a critical security tool like VMware Carbon Black. The potential for false positives or misinterpretations necessitates a structured approach to avoid overreacting or underreacting. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a tiered investigation process. This aligns with best practices in incident response and cybersecurity frameworks, which emphasize a systematic approach to threat detection and remediation. By first isolating the affected endpoint or process, the security team can prevent potential lateral movement of a threat without immediately impacting broader operations. Simultaneously, gathering detailed telemetry and contextual information allows for a more accurate assessment of the anomaly's severity and origin. This methodical approach ensures that actions taken are proportionate to the identified risk, minimizing disruption while effectively addressing the security concern. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for evidence-based decision-making in security operations, which are implicitly supported by regulatory expectations for due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. Incorrect approach is analysis. Immediately disabling the entire Carbon Black agent across all endpoints is a premature and overly broad response. This action would cripple the organization's ability to monitor and protect its entire environment, potentially leaving it vulnerable to other threats. It represents a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment and incident triage, violating the principle of proportionality in security responses. Such an action could also lead to significant operational downtime and business disruption, which could have regulatory implications if it impacts compliance with service-level agreements or data protection mandates. Ignoring the alert entirely due to a history of false positives is equally problematic. While false positives can occur, dismissing alerts without investigation is negligent. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in monitoring security events and a failure to adapt to evolving threat landscapes. This approach directly contravenes the expectation that security systems are actively managed and that alerts are treated with appropriate scrutiny. Regulatory frameworks often mandate proactive security monitoring and incident response, and ignoring alerts would be a clear violation of these requirements. Escalating the alert to a third-party incident response firm without any initial internal investigation is inefficient and potentially costly. While external expertise is valuable, a basic level of internal triage is expected to provide the third party with sufficient context to begin their work effectively. This approach bypasses essential internal due diligence and could lead to unnecessary expenses or delays if the initial internal assessment could have resolved the issue or provided critical initial data. It suggests a lack of internal capability or a failure to leverage existing resources, which can be viewed as a lapse in operational efficiency and responsible resource management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured incident response framework. This typically involves phases such as preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. In this scenario, the identification phase has been triggered. The decision-making process should prioritize containment and further investigation before implementing broad disruptive actions. This involves 1. Triage. Quickly assess the alert's potential impact and urgency. 2. Containment. Isolate the immediate source of the alert to prevent further spread. 3. Investigation. Gather detailed telemetry and contextual data to understand the anomaly. 4. Eradication/remediation. Based on the investigation, take appropriate action to remove the threat or correct the issue. 5. Recovery. Restore affected systems and operations. 6. Lessons learned. Analyze the incident to improve future detection and response. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, proportionate, and aligned with both security best practices and regulatory expectations for diligent security management. Question 19. The efficiency study reveals that the current implementation of VMware Carbon Black Endpoint Standard is not fully leveraging its threat intelligence capabilities, leading to a higher than expected number of false positives and missed detections. Which of the following approaches best addresses this issue to improve the security posture and operational efficiency? Option A. Increase the retention period for endpoint logs to allow for more historical analysis of potential threats. Option B. Disable all non-critical threat intelligence feeds to reduce the volume of data processed by the system. Option C. Randomly adjust detection rule thresholds across the Carbon Black platform to see if false positives decrease. Option D. Conduct a targeted impact assessment of specific threat intelligence feeds and their configuration within the Carbon Black environment to identify tuning opportunities. The correct answer is D. Conduct a targeted impact assessment of specific threat intelligence feeds and their configuration within the Carbon Black environment to identify tuning opportunities. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the current implementation of VMware Carbon Black Endpoint Standard is not fully leveraging its threat intelligence capabilities, leading to a higher than expected number of false positives and missed detections. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the organization's security posture and operational efficiency. A failure to optimize the Carbon Black deployment can result in significant security breaches or wasted resources investigating non-existent threats. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for robust security with the practicalities of managing security tools. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and evidence-based method for improving the effectiveness of the security solution. By focusing on a targeted impact assessment of threat intelligence feeds and their integration, the security team can identify specific areas for tuning. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk management, ensuring that the organization's security investments are yielding optimal results. Furthermore, this approach is consistent with the general guidance found in IT security, best practices and frameworks that emphasize proactive threat hunting and intelligent security operations, which are core tenets of effective endpoint protection. An incorrect approach that involves disabling threat intelligence feeds entirely would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action would directly contravene the implied duty of care to protect organizational assets and data. It would also likely violate internal security policies and potentially external compliance requirements that mandate the use of up-to-date threat intelligence for defense. Another incorrect approach, such as randomly adjusting detection rules without a clear understanding of their impact, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to follow a structured problem-solving methodology. This haphazard method increases the risk of introducing new vulnerabilities or creating an unstable security environment, which is professionally unacceptable. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured impact assessment. This begins with clearly defining the problem and its potential consequences. Next, it requires gathering data and evidence to understand the root cause, as revealed by the efficiency study. Then, potential solutions should be evaluated based on their feasibility, effectiveness, and alignment with organizational goals and regulatory obligations. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented with a plan for monitoring and validation to ensure its success and to facilitate further optimization. Question 20. Analysis of a potential data exfiltration event impacting customer PII and financial data. What is the most appropriate initial step to take after initial detection, considering the need to understand the scope and potential consequences before implementing broad remediation actions? Option A. Initiate a full system rollback to a known good state across all production environments. Option B. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to identify the specific systems, data types, and business functions affected by the potential exfiltration. Option C. Immediately isolate all network segments that house customer data to prevent further unauthorized access. Option D. Wait for the Security Operations Center to complete a comprehensive forensic analysis before taking any containment measures. Correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to identify the specific systems, data types, and business functions affected by the potential exfiltration. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term security posture and compliance requirements. The organization is facing a potential data breach, which necessitates a swift response. However, the impact assessment must be thorough to ensure that remediation efforts do not inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or violate regulatory mandates. The challenge lies in the urgency of the situation versus the need for a systematic and compliant approach to understanding the scope and consequences of the incident. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive impact assessment before implementing significant changes to the security environment. This aligns with the principles of responsible incident response and data protection, which are often codified in regulatory frameworks. By understanding the full scope of the potential breach, including the types of data affected, the systems compromised, and the potential for unauthorized access or exfiltration, the organization can make informed decisions about containment, eradication, and recovery. This systematic evaluation ensures that remediation actions are targeted, effective, and do not lead to unintended consequences, such as disrupting critical business operations or failing to meet reporting obligations. Adhering to established incident response frameworks, which typically mandate impact assessment, is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and maintaining regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that bypasses a formal impact assessment to immediately isolate all potentially affected systems is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of understanding of the potential scope and nature of the incident. Without a proper assessment, the organization risks overreacting, which could lead to unnecessary business disruption and potentially impact systems that are not actually compromised, thereby violating operational continuity requirements. Furthermore, this approach might lead to the premature destruction or alteration of evidence, hindering a thorough forensic investigation, and potentially impeding the ability to accurately determine the extent of the breach and notify affected parties as required by regulations. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on immediate technical containment without considering the broader business and regulatory implications, is also professionally unsound. This narrow focus can lead to solutions that are technically sound in isolation, but fail to address the full spectrum of the incident's impact. For instance, it might overlook the need to preserve logs for regulatory audits or fail to identify the specific types of sensitive data that require notification to individuals or regulatory bodies. This oversight can result in noncompliance with data breach notification laws and other relevant regulations. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying any action until a full, exhaustive investigation is completed, is professionally negligent. While thoroughness is important, an indefinite delay in response to a potential data breach is contrary to the principles of timely incident handling. Regulatory frameworks often stipulate specific timeframes for detection, containment, and notification of security incidents. Prolonged inaction can exacerbate the damage, increase the likelihood of data exfiltration, and lead to severe penalties for noncompliance with breach reporting requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response plan that includes distinct phases: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. Within the identification phase, a critical step is the impact assessment. This assessment should be guided by established frameworks and regulatory requirements relevant to the organization's industry and the types of data it handles. Professionals should ask, what systems are affected? What data is at risk? What is the potential business impact? What are the regulatory notification obligations? By systematically answering these questions, informed decisions can be made regarding the most appropriate and compliant course of action.